what type of jurist would you advocate for, and how would you convince Senate leadership to hold hearings on a nominee?
Well, I think that any jurist that gets nominated should have a brilliant legal mind, a broad legal work that we can evaluate. I would love to see someone who looks more like America. There are some great justices who are Asian American. There is Jacqueline Nguyen, who's always one of the finalists, and she came to this country as a Vietnamese boat person as a baby. The Senate needs to simply do its job and have a hearing and then have a vote. There's a meeting with Merrick Garland, but never actually said to Mitch McConnell, hold the hearing, or I'm not going to vote for you as Senate Majority Leader. You know, he says he sent a letter to his colleagues and asked them to demand a hearing, but at no point did he organize his colleagues to send a letter to Chuck Grassley and say, have the hearing. That's not leadership. That's actually just, eyewash.
Thank you. I was the first Republican senator to meet with Merrick Garland, met with him, and I urged my colleagues to also meet with him, and I led the Republican conference. After I had my meeting, 12 Republican senators also met with him. I have also called for hearings that I would think be a good thing for the country. I would go back to something that my opponent just said. I think we should get away from a racial and a gender politics, finding out who should be a justice. Can't we just get away from race in America and pick the best person, regardless? If they claim to be from a certain race, I would ask, what do you plan to do? Do you plan on going to 23andMe to check out if someone actually hits the exact box that you have? I would. Let's just have the best judge possible forward, regardless of racial politics.
So what specifically will you do to improve the trust that people need to have in their lawmakers, and what will you do to improve working relationships in the Senate?
What I would do is to serve as the glue between the House and Senate. That I would say that after my stroke, I sat for a lot of time thinking about my job and representing the state. If I could analogize to you, I would say the Senate is like one big national corral. To give you an analogy, that corral is filled with 50 different wagons, one named after each state. Each wagon is pulled by 2 horses. The Illinois wagon pulled by a horse named Kirk and a horse named Durbin. If the Kirk and Durbin horses are always nipping at each other, then the Illinois wagon is not going to go very far. I insisted that I have a good relationship with Dick Durbin and built that relationship, so we have a good policy going forward that would be good for. I would say one of the things my opponent just talked about, another thing, I lost train of thought there.
But I think what the people need is to understand that the members of Congress understand their challenges. And when I travel the state and I talk to families and I talk about what it was like to be on food stamps and what it was like to have a high school English teacher buy me dinner because I wasn't going to eat when the food stamps ran out at the end of the month, they get it, that I know what it means to be hungry, that they know what it means to be struggling. And they just want to know that the people fighting for them understand that even though they're on their knees, they're not giving up, and that they're fighting every single day to put bread on the table, to send their kids to college, to pay the mortgage, and yes, to pay their taxes, and to contribute to this great nation and this great state that is Illinois.
I would pick up on that one train of thought that I just lost there. The reason why we lost so many jobs, I would say, was probably because we had a criminal like Rod Blagojevich, who my opponent served as governor. We got to make sure we elect honest people to government, and not people like Rod, your old boss, who go to jail.
Can or should anything be done to limit campaign or outside spending in politics, and how do you get that done?
I'm going first.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I want public financing of campaigns. I want to get all money out of politics. I also think in the short term what we can do is support the Disclose Act. It would actually force folks who are giving money to super PACs to disclose who those people are. We don't know who they are. It's dark money. My opponent actually is supporting making it darker and less transparent. I think that the American people deserves to know, and we deserve to get rid of Citizens United. I fully support Move to Amend, but in the meantime, I think the best way to get rid of Citizens United is to actually have a functioning Supreme Court, bring another case to the Supreme Court so that the individual person's voice is just as important as that of a large corporation.
The reform that we need is to make sure that we have instant disclosure, that once a contribution is made, you should be able to read it on the internet.
What specific tax policies do you favor to promote fairness and economic growth while still generating enough revenue for necessary government expenditures?
With regard to tax policy, I think we should have a fairer tax. We have about 72 special interest provisions that ought to be wiped out to make sure that people with the best lawyers don't pay the lowest taxes. I think a fatter, fairer tax would be a way to go.
If we're going to lower taxes for the top 1%, we should be lowering taxes for middle-income families, working families as well. My opponent called himself a fiscal conservative. He's no fiscal conservative. By 2019, in just 2 years, our national debt will be upwards of $16 trillion. 50% of that will be as a result of the war in Iraq and the Bush tax cuts, both of which he voted for.
Do you think that climate change is real and that it's a man-made, exasperated problem? And what would you support in order to help combat climate change?
Well, I am, of course, climate change is real, and I support an all-of-the-above approach in attacking climate change. It's everything from moving our country towards being carbon neutral, moving our country towards clean energy. Illinois is uniquely positioned to lead the clean energy revolution, and yet we've not taken advantage of it. It's why I want to invest in Illinois manufacturing, especially when it comes to clean energy. We here in Illinois produce gearboxes for windmills, windmill towers, and yet we only get 5% of our energy from wind power, and Iowa gets 30%. We have the corn and the soybean farmers. We should be leading the world and leading the nation when it comes to biofuels.
When I was, before elected, I was elected to public office. I was a congressional staffer that went to the Kyoto climate change negotiations. And what I learned there was that most emissions are going to be from developing countries. And that the best thing that we can do in climate change is make sure that China converts to a more nuclear future to limit the one coal burning plant coming out a week that we expect.
Senator, gun violence remains a problem across our state and nation. What additional federal laws, if any, are needed to reduce that gun violence?
Additional laws we need are, I'm very proud of the F- record that I currently have from the NRA. That's unusual for a Republican. It shows just how independent I am. In my legislation I put forward with Kirsten Gillibrand, Democratic junior senator from New York, we criminalize gun trafficking to criminal organizations. I want to shut down the relationship between Westwood Sports and Hammond, Indiana, that CPD, Chicago Police Department, say is responsible for 515 crime guns in Chicago.
Well, I just participated in the sit-in in the House of Representatives with the great John Lewis demanding a vote on gun violence legislation, and quite a few senators came over to support us. Unfortunately, my opponent did not. I think we need universal background checks and close the loophole for people who can buy. If you can't pass a background check in a gun store, you shouldn't be able to go on the internet or to a gun show to buy a gun without background checks. That's currently happening. I don't think that you should be able to buy armor-piercing bullets. Armor-piercing bullets are not needed to go hunting. They're used for one thing, to pierce body armor. I think that we can certainly get rid of the high-capacity magazines. Again, this is, I'm a marksman. I fired expert in the Army at least once or twice here and there. I come from a marksman's family of sportsmen. But really, you don't need a high-capacity magazine to go hunting. If you need a high-capacity magazine to go hunting, you're a really bad hunter. And so there are some basic things that you can do, and I'm co-sponsoring legislation to close one of these loopholes that actually, if you go out of business as a gun store owner, you lose your firearm dealer's license. Right now, you can convert your entire gun store inventory to personal use and sell it without background checks. We need to close that loophole.
I believe if you are too dangerous to fly on a civil aircraft in America, you're too dangerous to buy a firearm. That no-fly, no-buy provision was voted on the Senate. I was the only Republican to vote for no-fly, no-buy.
Thank you, Senator. We move on now to closing statements. Congresswoman Duckworth, you go first.
Well, I just want to thank everyone for participating in our democracy today. It's why I served in the military. It's why we have men and women serving overseas right now, defending that right. So thank you for doing this. I want to go to the United States Senate because I want to serve the people of Illinois. I know what it's like to work hard every single day and don't see that you're getting ahead. That's why I believe so strongly that we need a real investment in this state. We need infrastructure investment. We need investment in American manufacturing. We need to invest in our educational system, not just because it's good to support students, but because it's a piece of our national strength. One of the reasons that I got into public service was because I feel like I owe for all of those folks who took care of me when I was a kid and I was hungry and I wasn't sure I was going to be able to go to college or graduate high school, but there was a high school there that I could graduate from that was free and was public. It was in my neighborhood. There was a state college that I could go to so that I was able to use Pell Grants and student loans and graduate, so that when the Army came calling and asked me to serve, I was ready. But if those things had not been there for me, I wouldn't be in front of you today running for the United States Senate. And how many Americans are we leaving behind all across this great state who don't have that opportunity? How many senior citizens are wondering, am I going to have to work for the rest of my life? We can do better. We are better. And if you send me to United States Senate, I will work hard every single day to represent each and every one of you to the best of my ability. Thank you.
Senator Kirk, your closing statement. Ladies and gentlemen, Senator Kirk,
Thank
go
you.
ahead.
I would say that in my years as serving as your senator, I have sought every day, despite my stroke, to go in there and be the glue between the Republicans and Democrats and be the personality that most advantaged my state. I worry about my opponent is so partisan, she would go to war with the opposite party, which is no way to get anything done in the Senate. You got to not go to war with anybody in the Senate, because you will absolutely run aground there. And I want to make sure that my record of building bipartisan sanctions on Iran and saving the Export-Import Bank of the United States, which is responsible for 47,000 jobs right here in Illinois, is this one that motivates you to support a moderate that works between the two parties and is effective and is not rated as the most ineffective congresswoman in the House, and not with a 94% record of voting with the people of California.